Section 4. You will hear part of a linguistics lecture about a language called Bislama that is spoken in the Pacific Islands. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40 on page 7. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good morning and welcome back to this series of linguistics lectures. Today, I will be talking about the language Bislama, which is a form of Pidgin English. Linguists use the term pidgin to describe new languages that are created by combining two or more existing languages, often in a simplified form. The study of pidgin languages is important because it provides us with information about language change and modification. The pidgin English known as Bislama is used in the South Pacific nation of Vanuatu, a group of islands where 81 first languages are still regularly used by the local people. There are a further 17 local languages that are in danger of dying out and 8 that have been identified as extinct. This gives a total of 106 first languages in all, a very high number for a small country with a population of just 200,000 people. Then thinking about foreign languages, English is the most important and has official status largely because it is the medium for all education purposes. However, it is Bislama that is the most widely spoken language in the country, used regularly by more than 90% of the population. We should note here that in earlier times some people had negative feelings towards the language. In fact, for many years it was commonly referred to as a broken language and its use was discouraged. But attitudes have changed dramatically and today the people of Vanuatu are very proud of this unique language. It is only when we understand the historical context that we can comprehend just why Bislama developed in Vanuatu. The first form of Pidgin English in this region can be traced to around 1800, when foreign traders arrived and local people were recruited to work as sailors. On board multilingual ships, there was an obvious need for a common tongue and Pidgin English was born. This early form of Bislama continued to spread as trade in the Pacific developed in sandalwood and other local commodities. Then from about 1860, a lot of people from Vanuatu travelled to Australia to work on the new plantations as labourers. Again, because of the multilingual nature of these workplaces, it was very important to have a common language. Finally, in modern times, there have been other pressures that have maintained the need for a common language. Like many other parts of the world from about the 1950s, Vanuatu experienced a significant migration of its people from small villages into the city, and it has been here that Bislama has really established itself as the country's first language. So then, how can we describe the language itself? In general terms, Pidgin languages can be defined as extremely simple versions of the original language. However, this is not a satisfactory definition in this case, and linguists prefer to describe Bislama as a developed Pidgin because it has more rules and ideas than most simple Pidgin languages found in other parts of the world. Let's think first about the vocabulary. Because Britain was the colonial power, the majority of Bislama's vocabulary is derived from English. However, some care needs to be taken here. For example, the word from in Bislama can also mean because of, so we need to be aware that words can have a wider range of meanings in Bislama. Indeed, there are numerous other potentially misleading terms, and English is not the only contributor to the vocabulary. Again, because of the region's history, there are some words, around 5 to 10%, that are derived from French. Then, a relatively small number of words have been taken from local Pacific languages. Usually this is the case where there is no English equivalent for naturally occurring phenomena or to describe some aspect of the culture that is unique to the country. Finally, a word about grammar. Although the vocabulary is based largely on English, it's important to note that the grammatical structure of Bislama is derived from patterns common in the local languages of Vanuatu. So, for example, there are two distinct pronouns meaning we. One means I and you, and another means I and some others, but not you. Sounds confusing in English, but in the local languages, such distinctions are common. A different example concerns the word long. It is almost the only preposition in Bislama and may be used in place of a whole range of English words such as at, to, with, on, in, and so on. Well, that is the end of the formal part of the lecture. If you have any questions now, I'll be most happy to answer.
That is the end of Section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers. That is the end of the listening test. You now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the listening answer sheet. You have 2 minutes left. You have 1 minute left. Please stop writing and wait for your question booklet to be collected.
Section 4. You will hear part of a lecture on the ways that supermarkets use layout to increase sales. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40 on pages 6 and 7. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
We've been looking at marketing techniques which influence buying decisions. Some of these techniques are related to the way the products are presented in the store. For supermarkets, the store layout is not as random as it seems. Decisions have to be made about the arrangement of the aisles where the customers walk, and the shelves and so on where the products are displayed. The most common layout pattern is the grid layout, where parallel aisles are arranged in a rectangular pattern. Supermarkets like this layout as it allows them to utilise floor space efficiently by providing the greatest amount of display space proportionate to aisle space. Also, this layout helps to manage traffic flow as it encourages people to all walk in one direction. The main weaknesses of the grid layout are the monotony of rows of aisles and the fact that it is easier for customers to rush through the supermarket without lingering. Another layout pattern used by supermarkets is known as the free-form. Here, displays and aisles are arranged in a random pattern. The good thing about this layout is that customers tend to spend more time in the store as they wander about looking for different products. Its main weakness is the inefficient use of space, which means it is less cost-effective. Then we have the boutique layout, where everything is organised around a food specialty, such as the bakery. The advantage of this layout is that it divides parts of the store into smaller areas, which may be distinguished by changes in flooring or displays. A further advantage is that this style of layout is attractive to shoppers. Space, however, is not used economically, and it is therefore expensive. The choice of location of particular types of items in the store is also important. A supermarket's design aims to direct customers to the store's side and rear walls. Items typically displayed along the rear length of the store include meat and dairy products, since these appear on the grocery list of the majority of shoppers. This means shoppers must pass by a large number of other items to get to them. Items which consumers tend to spend more time considering before buying, such as cosmetics, are usually placed away from the busy areas so that people can look at them in comfort without feeling rushed. Products placed at the end of aisles are clearly visible, and therefore these locations provide a greater opportunity for shoppers to view the products. Consumers tend to assume that items on display at the end of an aisle are on sale, but this is often not the case. In fact, supermarket managers often place products which are not selling quickly enough in these positions. The placement of products on shelves is very carefully planned. Supermarket executives use computer-generated plans to help them place products on shelves in a way that ensures consumers spend more. The eye level of the average woman is 1 metre 60 centimetres off the floor, which is the height of the middle shelves, so the things which cost more are placed here, while cheaper products are placed on higher or lower shelves. Only items targeted at children break this rule. They are placed on the lowest shelves. Supermarkets also use a range of other marketing techniques to encourage consumers to spend more. It's no accident that in nearly every supermarket, the fruit and vegetable department is the first shoppers come to as they enter the store. These, together with flowers, produce a greater profit than any other department. After complaints from parents, many supermarkets no longer place popular products aimed at children on the shelves next to the checkout. Instead, you are most likely to find products aimed at impulse buyers, such as chocolate, magazines and other treats here. Many supermarkets have also expanded into non-food areas such as clothing, entertainment and stationery. These products often find...
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers. That is the end of the listening test. You now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the listening answer sheet. You have 2 minutes left. You have 1 minute left. Please stop writing and wait for your question booklet to be collected.
Section 4. You will hear a tutor talking to a group of students about a project to build a driverless vehicle. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40 on pages 7 and 8. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Hello, everyone. I have an exciting announcement to make. The university has decided to enter an international competition next year, and we are going to need some enthusiastic undergraduates to help us with the project. The competition is to make an automated vehicle, a kind of robot that will be able to move quickly and accurately on its own. All the vehicles will then enter a race which will take place here in the U.S. So the engineering school will be collaborating with the computer science department and possibly the automotive design department, although that's yet to be confirmed. What they have to do is try to design an automated vehicle which will be able to complete the course. To give you an idea of how tough this race is, one vehicle last year only managed 12 kilometers of the 280-kilometer stretch of California desert that forms the racetrack. The vehicles in the race must cover the whole distance without a human driver and, quite autonomously, identify and steer around corners and avoid unexpected hazards, things like rocks, for example. It's a challenging task because there are lots of obstacles of this kind along the route. As I said, in last year's event, the most successful vehicle only drove 12 kilometers. Then its team decided to deactivate it because it had gotten too near a cliff. In the race held earlier this year, there still wasn't a winner, but they did much better, and there was one design which we will be analyzing carefully in seminars. Its strength was in its onboard technology. That particular vehicle built a three-dimensional picture of its surroundings using video cameras and lasers. It was equipped with 7 laptop computers, which analyzed the incoming information 10 times a second. And it drove along at a comfortable 55 kilometers per hour. The design details have been published, so we hope to learn from them and go on to make ours even better for next year's competition. The competition is open to all universities, and there's a prize of $2 million for the winner. But it's really about more than that. The sponsors are hoping to see innovative design ideas that they can transfer into commercial production. You'll get a lot out of this project as well in terms of working as a team and broadening your knowledge of the subject. The key to winning is unlikely to be anything to do with what the vehicle looks like. Programming skills will decide who eventually wins first prize. The design will need technological expertise in this area above all, and that's what the team who work on the project will need to focus on. I'll be handing out some scientific reports about this year's vehicle shortly. It's interesting to read that even after months and months of planning, building, and trials, many of the teams were amazed that the vehicles did what they wanted them to do at all, because so many things can go wrong on the day. So even though no vehicle actually completed the course, they were pleased they got as far as they did. Right. If any of you are interested, this is the plan of action. Keep an eye on the main notice board for details. Firstly, at the beginning of May, we'll be scheduling a seminar to introduce the project to anyone who might be interested. Later in the month, we'll be asking you to submit a short essay letting us know why you feel you should be chosen to take part in the project. You'll need to tell us about any particular skills that you have and can bring to the team, and any experience you may have had in the field. Then, in June, we're organizing a trip to a factory to chat over some design considerations with specialists there who have kindly agreed to act as consultants throughout the project. Then, at the beginning of the next semester in September, we thought we'd hold a weekend workshop to share ideas and see computer-aided design demonstrations. We have a brand new package which sponsors have kindly financed. You'll need to be able to use it with confidence before we start. In December, we'll be asking you to submit your outline designs, and the following month, we'll choose the team and start work in earnest. Okay, it sounds like a lot of fun, but it will also require serious commitment. So please think this through carefully. Some handouts are coming around now. Any questions?
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers. That is the end of the listening test. You now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the listening answer sheet. You have 2 minutes left. You have 1 minute left. Please stop writing and wait for your question booklet to be collected.
Section 4. You will hear part of a student presentation about a conservation project on the Florida coast of the United States. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40 on page 7. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Today I'm going to be talking about the first year of a regeneration project in a mangrove forest. Mangrove forests are found along river estuaries and coastlines and are important because they prevent flooding by acting as a barrier between the land and sea. The mangrove trees have special roots which can breathe and allow them to survive in thick, airless mud. They are also a very important habitat for wading birds, fish, and other animals. In the area where the project is taking place, there have been a number of problems since the area was first settled over 100 years ago. Many of the mangrove trees were initially burnt as firewood by local farmers. The mangrove forests were also poisoned by settlers' farming methods because the farmers used fertilizer to increase crop yields, and this started to seep into the water, eventually killing part of the mangrove forest. Farming in the area wasn't successful, and what was left of the mangrove forest area wasn't valued by local people as crops couldn't be grown there. And so what happened was that the area started to be used as somewhere to dump trash. Action was urgently needed to protect the mangrove forest and prevent flooding, and so the Mangrove Regeneration Project was set up. The conservationists involved decided to construct a sand barrier around the forests. But unfortunately, this proved to be ineffective. The only way forward appeared to be to grow new mangroves from seed. Several species of mangrove inhabit the forests in this area of the United States, but it is the gray mangroves that we are concerned with here. The seed of this plant is about the size of an almond, and most seeds fall only when they are fully ripe. The Mangrove Regeneration Project first began 3 years ago. The first set of seedlings was planted in small pots and left to germinate in a hothouse. The plants thrived, and large roots appeared at the bottom of the pots. Ideally, these seedlings should have been conditioned with increasingly salty water before being planted in the sea. They had, in fact, only been watered with rainwater. As the plants weren't used to a saline environment, it was decided to plant them out on the south side of a small island nearby. It was hoped that this would allow them to get used to salt water gradually, since this part of the island was flooded every day at high tide. There were over 100 plants planted in this particular spot, and it was necessary to protect them not from the large number of wading birds which visit the area looking for food, but from the large rabbit colony living in the area. The process for the second set of seedlings was completely different. Young seedlings were collected from the forests and then taken to a new site. The seedlings were then planted in the seabed behind old mangrove roots for protection. However, this method did not prove very successful, and the vast majority of these seedlings were washed away in a storm. Luckily, the first set of seedlings survived, and this method is the one which the project will continue to use in the future. Now, I'd like to describe in more detail the process.
That is the end of Section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers. That is the end of the listening test. You now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the listening answer sheet. You have 2 minutes left. You have 1 minute left. Please stop writing and wait for your question booklet to be collected.
Part 4. You will hear part of a lecture on nanotechnology and its applications. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Today's lecture is the first of a series of lectures on nanotechnology. Nanotechnology, sometimes shortened to nanotech, refers to the manipulation of matter on an atomic and molecular level. It's a science, engineering and technology conducted at the nanoscale, which is about 1 to 100 nanometers. It is the study and application of extremely small things and can be used across all the other science fields. Just how small is that? A nanometer is 1/1000th of a meter. The idea of nanoscale research first started from a physicist called Richard Feynman in 1959. He envisaged a process in which scientists would be able to manipulate and control individual atoms and molecules. In fact, it wasn't until 1981, with the invention of a special kind of microscope, that modern nanotechnology truly began. Even though nanotechnology has created many new materials and devices with a vast range of applications, there is always concern over these unnatural products. Many people are worried that they may pose a threat to the environment, health and safety, also known as EHS. In order to better understand and evaluate the potential harm, risk assessment has been introduced. There are also ongoing international collaborations on nano-EHS research and related policy issues. Despite the concern, nanotechnology has benefited society in unexpected ways. In the food processing industry, nanotechnology is leveraged against iron deficiency, which triggers anemia. For example, by reducing the particle size in potatoes, this new technology improves the bioavailability of this nutritional ingredient without the tendency to cause colour and odour changes. In terms of packaging, nanomaterials are more economical and are used in all sorts of products, chocolate in particular. Nanotechnology can also enhance the flavour of food. On a domestic scale, we expect more smart furniture, which is made of shape memory alloys, to be manufactured. But nanotechnology has much wider application than this and could also help develop sustainable agriculture. It offers great potential to strengthen the effect of fertilizers, thereby minimizing the environmental impact and boosting the productivity of plants in the soil. In the area of medicine, bioengineers have developed simple and inexpensive nanoscale delivery vehicles. Conductors like carbon nanotubes have been invented with varying structures. Such nanotubes have become increasingly attractive to researchers because of their ability to efficiently deliver drugs into veins. This means that higher doses of drugs loaded on them can be transported from the administration sites to the effects-related sites, such as cancer focuses, thus decreasing toxic side effects while increasing the treatment effects. The research team has also developed a widely accepted material that can be used to coat different surfaces, including wood, plastic and glass. It is mainly comprised of silver. Such nanoparticles can eventually kill some microbes due to the antiseptic properties. The whole process is simple, easy to apply, and more importantly, harmless to the environment. Surprisingly, nanotechnology has major implications for our health as well. By changing the metabolic rate through a particular type of protein, obese patients are able to burn calories faster, even under a high-calorie diet. Therefore, treatment programs are provided for patients to lose weight by disposing of excess fat in a relatively safer manner. The finding may help explain why overweight people struggle to lose weight. Their stored fat is actively fighting against their efforts to burn it off at the molecular level. Further research is mainly focused on the clinical and commercial developments of therapies for obesity, diabetes, and other associated conditions such as heart disease. In terms of cosmetics, the applications of nanotechnology and nanomaterials can be found in many products. There are two main uses for nanotechnology in cosmetics. The first one is that nanoparticles are commonly used as UV filters in anti-aging sun care products to avoid skin damage caused by the sun. In addition, nanotechnology has played an important role in delivering active ingredients to the skin. The mechanism proves to improve the bioavailability of actives and enhance skin hydration. The wide variety of nanotechnology applications leave no doubt that this field will only continue to get more exciting, and I look forward to seeing these developments further branch out.
That is the end of Part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 4. Part 4. You will hear part of a lecture on bird research in Australia. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good afternoon. This is the third session of the series of lectures on wildlife. For this lecture, we're going to look at two studies on the habitats of birds and protection measures taken in Australia, including the basic methodology and related areas of research. Now, let me give you some background information about the first research project on birds. The study was carried out by R.B. Cunningham and his team from the Australian National University in 1995. The primary goal was to detect the breeding habits and resting sites of some birds, especially those protected species in urban regions. These species included birds like peregrine falcons and kestrels in Australia. The bird data set consisted of a total of 153 species recorded from 946 sites. One might expect that in order to obtain valid data on their distribution patterns and population densities, researchers had to count through binoculars. Instead, they managed to estimate with various standard distance sampling methods like random sampling. In addition, a mapping system was used to study their companionship behaviour. It recorded proposed birds' nesting sites to monitor the mating behaviour of targeted species. To obtain valid data of birds' whereabouts, researchers attached identity tags to birds' legs transmitting radio signals. The tagging process was done when the birds were between 5 and 7 days of age. After the initial tagging, data was collected from subsets of radio-tagged birds, making it possible to assess the trends of birds over 15 months. So, what did they find? Well, as it turned out, many of the birds tagged had the tendency to nest in the same habitat where they grew up. Their nesting sites were quite varied and included freshwater reed beds, tidal reed beds, agricultural crops, and man-made sites. Even though naturally occurring nests were common, birds sometimes accidentally nested in man-made devices like power towers, chimneys, and tunnels. This research also studied the impact of humans on bird communities and found out that pollution had contributed greatly to the declining birth rates of some species, which were considered to be extinct or threatened to vanish from the study area. These species are dependent on natural forests because of their breeding holes. They will become extinct when local natural forests continue to be polluted heavily. A number of measures were thus taken by members from local animal conservation organisations to boost their alarming survival rates. Firstly, breeding boxes were placed in trees, taking on the role of breeding holes that were contaminated. Protection guidelines were also introduced strictly prohibiting killing, disturbance, and habitat destruction. A further measure was taken to ensure the safety of birds from wind farms. In fact, birds are sometimes shedded by wind turbine blades. A great deal of work was done on how to prevent them from colliding with turbines. A case in point was protecting space for bird migration by ensuring that migratory routes were kept free. Falcons generally cope well with wind turbines, but not in weather conditions where visibility is bad. So, with knowledge of how fast falcons fly, bird stations in northern Australia can notify wind farms further south of the falcon's approach so that turbines can be shut down as they pass by. Then, another piece of research was done a couple of years later by Conway in 2006. His team detected the calling frequency of seabirds flying at night. Acoustic signals are important communication tools for birds. These signals can indicate social cohesion, prey location, and breeding behaviour. Courtship songs are common among various species during mating seasons. Males produce calling songs that attract distant females, and then courtship songs will induce nearby females to respond. Surveyors also took recordings of the sounds of all the individual birds detected. A tablet PC was used to process detailed information like sound pitch, spectrum, length, and timing of surveys. To minimise the disturbance on the bird community, all the sounds were recorded from a distance using microphones to detect noise. They found that the probability of call events was much higher for solitary birds communicating early and late in the day. Further analyses indicated that during foraging, the frequency of calls was significantly greater for birds encountering schooling fish, and birds called sooner after a catch in these foraging scenarios, compared with when only single fish were encountered. The results of this study showed that increased calling activity in the presence of more profitable prey could be of crucial importance to seabirds that benefit from group foraging. So, does anyone have more questions on...
That is the end of Part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 4. 4. You will hear part of a lecture on organic farming. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Hi everyone. What I'm going to talk about today is organic farming. Let's first look at what organic farming is. It can be defined as one or more systems of production which don't use synthetic fertilizers, man-made pesticides, herbicides, antibiotics, or livestock feed additives to grow crops and raise animals. Virtually all organic farmers prefer to use renewable resources and recycling to give what conventional farmers might consider waste back to the soil of Mother Nature. From this, we can see organic farming is a sustainable production system, which is one of its advantages. Organic farmers use numerous techniques to promote the quality of life of plants and animals within existing ecosystems and minimize pollution that occurs with all conventional farming practices. Another benefit is that, with the increasing consumer demand for a healthier, more nutritionally balanced product, the sales of organically produced food are promoted. According to the research, it has become the fastest growing sector of agriculture and has shown an annual increase of at least 20% during the last 6 years. What's more, both chemical fertilizers and synthetic pesticides consume non-renewable resources such as oil and coal, but the development of organic farming can lower the demand for these fertilizers and pesticides, so it is conducive to the conservation of essential energy. At the same time, it also can reduce industrial pollution caused by the production of these chemical substances. Organic farming differs greatly from the traditional one in a number of ways. Let's discuss it from the perspective of agricultural biodiversity, firstly. For instance, earthworms are an important indicator of soil fertility. Studies have shown that the density and species number of earthworms in organically managed soils are 3 times as high as those in conventional fields. Moreover, the biodiversity in organic farming can also be reflected in the number of insects, which is twice as many as those in traditional farms. This might be highly related to the fact that organic vegetables are grown without any human-made pesticides, making these vegetables more likely to be damaged. The other main difference between organic and traditional farming lies in crop yields, one of the biggest concerns of organic farmers. Organic farms, though possibly well adapted for certain local environments, produce less food per unit of land. For example, organic vegetables like tomatoes and potatoes yielded are 40% less than conventional ones. In addition, research has also found the number of weeds produced in winter is about 90% at present, which has decreased by 10% than before. However, lower crop yields in organic farming are still inevitable at the moment. Anyway, organic farming is a new direction for agricultural development. These days, a variety of organic products are cultivated not only for humans but also for animals. For example, organic grass. It is commonly used in organic farms to feed cows. Because of the non-use of synthetic fertilizers or pesticides, it can protect cows from diseases brought by large-scale breeding, thus ensuring the quality of raw milk. But an interesting phenomenon is that its production has remained constant these years, which is quite unique compared with other types of crops. Research on organic farming has covered various aspects and involved many countries. According to one study, organic farming was proposed in India in the early 1960s, when it was faced with acute shortages of food grains due to the ever-increasing population and natural disasters. Although it could not be applied successfully at first, as farmers had been familiar with conventional instructions, proponents of organic farming claimed that organic agriculture emphasized biodiversity and effective soil management could enhance the capacity to mitigate and even reverse the effects of climate change. So, India needed organic farming along with modern scientific agriculture. The study shows that in 2016, India became the country with the largest number of organic products, and the production of crops kept growing year on year. Another international review about organic farming presents in the first part that people today have become increasingly interested in organic food, and this opinion is quite the same as that of other articles. But what impressed me most was the volume of the investigation the author did in different countries. He conducted a survey in 99 countries, of which 66 are convinced that organic farming is beneficial to animals, while 8 hold the opposite opinion, and the remaining 25 say it is inconclusive. Therefore, the last part of the review is mainly talking about whether organic farming brings positive effects to animals. We can see there are different views about the advantages of organic farming. Some may think it can provide more nutritious and healthier food. Others may say it can protect the natural environment and benefit wildlife. However, as far as I'm concerned, it's you, the ones who buy organic products, that will decide what they can bring to you, because market demand determines everything. Okay, that's all I want to say. Now, let's open it up for discussion.
That is the end of Part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 4. Part 4. You will hear part of a presentation about the early history of salt. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
In my presentation, I'm going to talk about salt. In modern times, when we talk about salt, people may associate it with high blood pressure or increased heart risk, and many health experts warn that we should use less salt in our meals and dishes. However, we should not ignore its importance in our cuisine and even in early human history. Salt is one of the oldest, most ubiquitous food seasonings. The taste of salt is one of the basic human tastes. More importantly, Salt plays an indispensable role in the health of human beings. For example, it regulates the body's acid-base balance. Because of its importance to survival, salt has often been considered a valuable commodity during human history. This can be tracked all the way back to ancient Greece, ancient Egypt, and ancient Rome, when salt was highly valued and used as a method of trade and currency. In ancient Rome, the busiest road leading to the city was the Via Salaria, which means the salt route in English. A soldier's pay, which partly consisted of salt, was known as salarium argentum in Latin, from which we derived the English word salary. A soldier's salary was cut if he was not worth his salt, an expression still used today. In fact, salt was not only the first condiment discovered, but also the first preservative. We know today that food goes bad because microorganisms in the food multiply in abundance, and a high salt environment is not conducive to microbial reproduction. Extremely high concentrations of salt can even kill microorganisms in the food. The ancients certainly didn't know this, but they did know that salted food can be preserved for a long time. The use of salt as a preservative can be traced to ancient Sweden. At first, hunting was the principal means of livelihood. In this case, meat supplies were unlikely to be frequent. What's more, fewer animals were available for hunting. In order to ensure the supply of meat, many families in Sweden began to raise animals in the surrounding forests during the summer, when the weather was suitable for animals to survive. These animals were fed every day until about 3 to 4 months later. That's in October. They were ready to be butchered for meat, and that was the only month when ancient Swedish people had fresh meat on their table. Then, with the continuous increase in productivity, people finally had some meat left. However, how to store the meat had become a headache until someone invented a whole new way to preserve food: salting. People tried to keep meat from going bad by adding some salt to it, and it could be preserved for several months and even years. There was evidence that salt was widely used to preserve meat. Historical documents in 1573 recorded the Swedish king's everyday meals, mentioning that 175 pounds of meat was consumed each year, but over 150 pounds was salty. From this, we can clearly see the importance of salt in Sweden at that time. In addition, the documents also noted the annual sales of beer in Sweden soared during that period, and this must be related to high levels of salt in their food. Now, let's turn to the sources of salt. Where is salt from? Well, salt is common in nature. It has long been found that salt can be extracted from seawater, mineral deposits, saline lakes, brine, spring, etc., among which the two most important ones are oceans and basins. On the floor of the latter often lie deserts, where traces of salt can be found, such as the Sahara. Furthermore, the quality of different salt types varies a lot. For example, salt from seawater is always mixed with impurities, so after the salt is dried, the sediments and other chemicals need to be purified before eating. However, this is not the case with salt from spring water. We can hardly find any impurities, and the salt level is much more concentrated. Then, how did people distribute salt around the world? Of course, in modern times, we have various ways of transporting goods, but in ancient times, it was not the case. Take ancient Sweden, we mentioned before, as an example. Because of the heavy use of salt in the diet, Sweden could not feed itself and had to import large amounts of salt from other countries. In order to make sure they could buy enough salt from abroad, the Swedish had to attach great importance to shipping and keep it undamaged, as it was the most crucial way at that time. While in other ancient countries, in order to distribute salt to other places, groups of men were employed. They put bags of salt on their shoulders or backs and moved them to the surrounding regions, and gradually these people were considered as a mode of transport in early times. Later, with the improvement of traffic conditions, salt trade between different regions was boosted, and long-distance food trade was also promoted, making communication between different cultures more frequent and...
That is the end of part 4. You now have 1 minute to check. Part 4. You will hear part of a lecture on cube houses in Rotterdam. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40. Good morning. In today's lecture, we're going to look at the cube houses, an iconic architectural complex in Rotterdam. First, I'm going to be telling you about the history behind it. As many may know, not much survived the bombing of Rotterdam during World War II, and it took a long while for the city to start the urban regeneration project. Dutch architect Pierre Blom designed Rotterdam's cube houses in the late 70s at the request of the city's planners. He had previously experimented with cubic architecture in the city of Helmond. So, when he was offered this project in the Oudehaven area of the city, he decided to expand upon his original idea. Blom believed that urban communities should live together under an urban roof. He designed the cube houses to recreate daily life in a village where individuals are closely connected and yet have their own separate space. And even after more than 30 years, the cube houses remain one of the city's most eye-catching developments. It's easy to see why. These striking homes are cubes tilted 45 degrees on their side. The result is buildings that look, feel and behave unlike anything you'll find elsewhere in the world. The concept behind these houses is that each elevated cube seems like a tree. And, collectively, the cube houses are in the shape of a forest, with each triangular roof representing a treetop. Interestingly, these houses are located right over a pedestrian bridge across one of the busiest streets into the city centre next to a railway station. The traffic-free area that connects the cubes includes a little children's playground, as well as small offices and studios. With thriving restaurants and cafes right on the doorstep, they were designed with the community very much in mind. However, the cube housing's development endured various challenges and complications during design and construction, and it once stopped as the designer had difficulty in finance. Luckily, the project resumed within 2 weeks after the designer received another round of grants from the City Council. So, what makes the cube houses different from traditional architecture? Let's look at some of its unique design features. Each cube house has a space of 100 square meters and is divided into 3 floors, and it is very striking to see these houses fixed on one angle. The tilted residences are constructed on 3 concrete pillars. The whole construction is made of 38 regular cube units, all connected together with 2 supersized cubes at both ends of the string. One of the 2 larger cubes was developed as an architecture school, and there is another building recently built between it and a warehouse. Standing at 3 floors tall, their ground floor is the entrance. When you enter a cube house, the first thing to get used to is that all the walls are slanted. You must take a narrow staircase to reach the lower floor. This level and the top level are both triangle-shaped. The lower level contains an open kitchen and a living room. The medium level houses a bathroom and 2 bedrooms, while the top level provides a great view since the apex of the room is a 3-sided pyramid with windows all around. In some cases, the top floor is used as a small rooftop garden. And as you enter the top half of the structure, your initial inclination may well be to mind your head. Now that you know the history and design features behind these odd-looking houses, you might be thinking about how it is to live in them. After curious bystanders kept disturbing the cube house's residents, one shrewd owner opened the Show Cube Museum, which gives visitors the chance to take a tour around a fully furnished cube house. It also highlights some of the everyday challenges that the residents face, such as buying and fitting furniture for a structure without straight walls. In recent years, Rotterdam's cube houses have been joined by another architectural icon just across the square. Rotterdam's Market Hall, the largest indoor market in the Netherlands, is another multi-purpose residential and retail complex that will live long in your memory, as well as helping to fill your belly with tasty treats. In 2009, the Rotterdam-based Personal Architecture, B&A, converted one of the larger cubes for one of the leading stay-okay hostel chains in the Netherlands. Today, the hostel invites everyone to experience what it's like to live in a cube house and enjoy a stunning panoramic vista of the surrounding area. What attracts guests most is its ideal location with a major railway station within a 5-minute walk. The accommodation is also offered at a fair price, which appeals to visitors both from home and abroad. That is the end of Part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 4. Part 4. You will hear part of a lecture on learner persistence. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Today, I'm going to talk about my research on learner persistence. Let me first introduce why I wanted to carry out such research. As a university teacher, I found learners' responses to certain things vary a lot. For example, some students may completely give up their degree studies because of a temporary illness, while others may overcome all kinds of difficulties and try their best to continue their studies. The latter are the students with learner persistence, and this is the group that I'm particularly interested in. To do the research, first, I selected my undergraduate students as the research sample, with a total of 200 people. All the students selected were seniors, and they had already stayed in the course very well. Although the sample was drawn from a range of ages, there were deliberately a large number of mature students, and there was one thing in common. All of those students were living at home in the local region. I wanted to maintain this element of consistency, so I didn't include those coming from outside this area. Then I designed a questionnaire that aimed to find out what their concerns had been when they began the course, and then what had made them stick at the 3-year studies in university. Findings from the first section pointed out that there were different concerns when they started their university studies. For example, some worried about the financial circumstances, while others were concerned about their careers after graduation. However, the research found the biggest concern for mature students tended to be the relationship with their children at home. Next, I wanted to find out what had made those students persist with their university studies. So in the second part, I designed my questionnaire under 3 main headings: social and environmental factors, other factors, and personal characteristics. And I included 3 levels of importance for each of these 3 headings. At the first level, those points identified by the respondents were regarded as the most important in learner persistence. Let's look at them one by one. For the first column, that's the social and environmental factors, a significant number of students said it was crucial to have effective support, whether from their tutors or friends. For other factors, students were driven not so much by high grades, but by what they regarded as a success in their studies. This was quite different from what I'd expected. Regarding personal characteristics, a sizable percentage of participants said they liked to take up a challenge, which was seen as a very important factor. Then at the second level of importance, in the first category, many of the respondents regarded the life they enjoyed at school as an important social factor because this gave them good experiences. In the second column, other factors, a lot of people said that the most significant thing was decent health, which was also conducive to their persistence in the studies. And then, under the third column, quite a number of respondents had the same view that they should have a range of interests in their everyday lives because this could broaden their minds and give them a sense of perspective, which less persistent learners might lack. And then on to the third level of importance. Under social factors, several respondents said that they had been keeping close to their tutors in their 3-year university studies. In the second column, for other factors, they mentioned it was very important to live in a family without any problems. And finally, under column 3, they talked about the capacity for multitasking, which was the ability to simultaneously deal with different problems. From these findings, I've concluded some recommendations on how to promote students' learner persistence. Primarily, I suggest that we should distribute questionnaires to the freshmen so as to make clear of their maturity when they begin the course. This is really our most important concern. Secondly, I propose that we should find ways to offer some training sessions to the students who are selected to encourage them to play the role of advisors. The purpose of this is to make support much more approachable to other students. Thirdly, in the evening and night, when offices are closed, students may have no one to turn to for help. As a result, I think we should provide online services to those in need. Researchers have pointed out that this service is actually more accessible than traditional services. And finally, if students don't submit their assignments before the deadlines, I think we teachers should contact the students first, rather than waiting for the students to come to us. So, this is all I want to share on my research. Now, let's turn to the next part. Are there any questions about...
That is the end of part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to part 4.